Hello, everybody, and welcome to Knowledge 10, Lesson 2, the Boston Tea Party. Well, let's begin by remembering the names of 3 English settlements in North America that we learned about: the Pilgrims in Plymouth, Roanoke Island, the Lost Colony, and Jamestown. Now, remember that those were some of the first English settlements, and as time passed, more and more English settlers arrived in North America. And all up and down the east coast of North America, they formed more colonies where they started new lives for themselves. Now remember, they all belonged to and they all originally came from Great Britain. And who governed and controlled the colonies? That was the British King and the British Parliament. And let's keep in mind that as the colonists needed more help to clear additional land for farming, they brought people from Africa and made them work as enslaved people. All right, so let's learn about some of the problems the colonists encountered and find out why they did something strange when they had the Boston Tea Party. For a long time, many colonists were proud to be British citizens, ruled by the King of Great Britain. But then things began to change. The King and the British Parliament had spent a lot of money helping to set up and protect the colonies. The colonies were occasionally under attack from Native Americans who themselves were afraid that their settlements would suffer because more and more people were coming from Great Britain, and the Native Americans looked at these growing English settlements and said, So to help pay for these expenses, Parliament decided to make the colonies in America pay taxes to Great Britain. Now, taxes are extra money that people pay when they buy certain things. For example, today we can pay taxes when we buy clothes at a department store, food in a restaurant, or gasoline for the car, and depending on the state where you live, you might have to pay $1 or $2 more for a new shirt than what's listed on the price tag. Even when you go to the book fair, you may be required to pay what's called sales tax. So you go there with $5 and you say, I'd like to buy this $5 book. And the book winds up costing you $5.45 because that 45 cents is tax. The stores don't keep that extra money. They must give the extra money or taxes to the government. These days, we vote and elect representatives or people to represent us in government. These people make decisions about how to spend taxes to provide public services that benefit everyone who lives here. The government uses the taxes to help pay for things that everybody needs, like schools, public transportation, roads, water, garbage service, police, fire protection, and other public services. Now here's an old-looking place, eh? This is the British Parliament. That's where their government is. Back in the time when the colonies were first established, the people who lived in the colonies were not permitted to vote and elect representatives or people to represent them in the British Parliament on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. So many people who lived in the American colonies in the 1700s thought that it was unfair for the British King to ask them to pay taxes. The colonists were asked to pay extra for stamps, sugar, and other things. Because the colonists could not voice their opinions to the British government through representatives, why, they wondered, should they have to pay taxes? It didn't seem fair to them. All over the colonies, people grew more and more angry, but it was in the colony of Massachusetts that tempers flared the most. King George of Great Britain sent troops to try to keep the peace in Boston, but it didn't help very much. Then in 1773, the British Parliament did something the colonists could not stand. They passed a law called the Tea Act and tried to force the colonists to buy tea from one British company only, charging a large tax for the tea. Now, keep in mind, every adult colonist or everybody over the age of 12 drank tea every day. They were English, and the English loved their tea. The colonists did not think it was fair to force them to pay more for tea, and they refused to pay taxes on tea. They began sending shiploads of tea back to Britain and ordering tea from the Dutch Republic instead, which is what we call the Netherlands today. You can see that on a map. This made the king even angrier. He told them that they could not send any more tea back to Great Britain without paying the tax. And because of this, the colonists of Massachusetts revolted. They rose up against the British king. They decided that they would not accept the king's decision. Shiploads of British tea continued to enter the port of Boston, Massachusetts. A port is a place on the coast where ships load and unload things. On a December night in 1773, so keep in mind it's cold in December, a group of men known as the Sons of Liberty planned a most unusual tea party. Now, if we were going to have a tea party, what might we do? Well, see if that's the kind of tea party that these guys had in mind. Smearing their faces with soot, grease, and streaks of red paint, they stuck feathers in their hair. Disguised as Mohawk Native Americans, a common symbol of freedom at the time, they made their way down to the harbor. Climbing aboard 3 British ships, they dumped 342 chests of valuable tea into the Boston harbor. This meant that the British lost that tea and the money that went with it. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Furious, King George of Great Britain closed the port of Boston, one of the American colony's most important ports. He told them that they would not receive any more goods from Britain until they paid for the tea that they had destroyed. With no supplies coming from Great Britain, there was nothing for the colonists to sell in their shops, so people had to close their shops. Many people lost their jobs. Food was scarce. Colonists from up and down the East Coast helped out, sending money and supplies to Massachusetts. What were the colonists to do? What should they say to the British king? Well, the people of Boston began to talk of war against Great Britain and its king. But other colonists warned them not to act so quickly. Wait a bit, they suggested. It's never a good idea to fight back without cooling off a bit first. All 13 colonies decided to come up with a plan together. They held a big meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which was about midway between the farthest New England colonies and the farthest southern colonies. Each colony elected representatives to attend the meeting. It was the first time that representatives from all the colonies, except Georgia, met together in one place. They called themselves the Continental Congress. Leaders in the colonies were divided. Some were loyal or faithful to Great Britain and their king, and they were called loyalists. After all, they said, we're British too. Others were beginning to think of themselves not as British citizens, but as Americans. They wanted to rule themselves instead of being ruled by a faraway king. These people were called patriots. Members of the Continental Congress included George Washington from Virginia, a young army commander who helped protect the colonies. Benjamin Franklin attended the second meeting of the Continental Congress. He was known for his ability to get people to work together. And one guy, the one that you see in color, is Thomas Jefferson. He was an excellent writer. He didn't attend, but he was elected anyway as a representative from Virginia. His writing skills made him famous. At that first Continental Congress, the representatives decided to approach the king in a friendly way. They sent him a friendly letter, telling him that they wanted things to work out peacefully. They asked the British Parliament to stop making laws or rules for them. We feel that we should create our own laws since we're not able to vote for laws in Parliament, they said. In the meantime, while they waited for an answer from the king, the colonists decided to stop selling goods to Great Britain and to stop buying goods from Great Britain. Now, this is important. It took them a long time to get an answer. They didn't have planes, so all of these messages had to go on a ship that could take up to 6 weeks to cross the ocean. So it's not like email or a text message where you get your answer right away. They were waiting months to hear. At the end of that meeting in Philadelphia, the colonists were still split in their opinions about what to do. The Loyalists hoped that the king would grant their requests, letting them make their own laws while still remaining British. The Patriots, though, kept things stirred up, talking of going to war and breaking away from Britain altogether. It certainly was not a calm time. All right, that was quite a story. What are taxes, by the way, and what are they used for? Remember, I said that it's extra money paid for goods that you buy that government uses to pay for things like schools, police, fire protection, water, garbage services, stuff like that. And what is a representative? That's important that you know that. That's a person that's elected to represent a larger group of people in the government. Like we elect a representative to go down to Washington so that that person can basically represent us, that is, share our opinions down in Washington. All right, and one more thing. In the read aloud, you heard King George told the colonists they would not receive any more goods from Britain. Say that word, goods. It's just like the word good with the z sound at the end. Goods. Goods are things that can be traded, bought, or sold. Like the workers unloaded goods from the ship in the harbor. Clothes are goods. Pineapples are goods. Rings are goods. You know, it's something that can be bought and sold. All right, tomorrow we are going to hear, not tomorrow, but over the weekend, that is Monday, we're going to hear lesson 3, which is the shot heard round the world.